Good afternoon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Race to Resilience event on transforming livelihoods with climate resilient housing. I repeat, this is a very sensitive and important title of the session, Transforming Livelihoods with Climate Resilient Housing. We are delighted to be here as a part of Asia Pacific Climate Week. I am Anand. I'm part of CII's Indian Green Building Council. I am working with this organization for the last 25 years. And very recently, I have been elected as the vice chairman for the Asia Pacific Network. That makes it all the more important for me to join this particular session. So it is again a pleasure to have you all and able to host today's exciting session where we are all going to hear directly from non-state actors who are taking up action in their communities to make them more resilient to the impact of climate change, which we are all witnessing, especially the Asian countries, especially in the Indian countries. Last 3-4 months itself, we had the storms on the western coast, which is very unusual, which we have not seen for many decades. And many of our countries in Philippines, Indonesia, Hong Kong, the occurrence of hurricanes and tsunamis and others have become very frequent. So that makes this particular race to resilience all the more important. And then 2 basic housekeeping points for the next 60 minutes or so for this particular session. Please feel free to use the chat function as we go and submit your questions via the question and answer session. We would love to hear more from you all in the session. And members of the Race to Resilience team are monitoring it. And I will put the questions forward to our esteemed and keynote speakers and other speakers in the panel discussion. So Amanda, can I get the next slide? So once again, the Race to Resilience is a very important topic for all of us, for the human race, especially from 2021 to 2030. If you see the Race to Resilience vision and the goal, for all those who may be new to the Race to Resilience, it is an UN-backed campaign to mobilize non-state actors to deliver locally led adaptation and resilience that puts people and nature at its heart. There are 25 initiatives now in this particular Race to Resilience, made up of over 1,000 non-state actor members underneath. Race to Resilience is creating an inclusive space for knowledge sharing and collaboration between resilience initiatives and their members. Of course, we want more organizations, big and small, who are all listening to today's session to join the Race to Resilience. So please be in touch with any one of us after the session or during the session. You're all most welcome to be part of this Race to Resilience movement. Cities can also join. I don't know wherever you are represented from, each city from Asia Pacific or across the globe. All of you are encouraged, the cities, to also join the Race to Resilience through the Cities to Race Resilience initiative, which has been just launched earlier in the day. Actually, today it has been launched. So the Race to Resilience is important because we don't want our communities to just survive a changed climate, but be able to thrive in spite of them with healthier, greener livelihoods. I repeat, we want them to thrive, healthier and greener livelihoods. The issue of housing is essential to delivering this, especially in the Asia Pacific region. Can I go to the next slide, please? So as you're able to see from the slide, the human exposure to the climate hazards are very phenomenal, and it has a greater impact, especially with the pandemic last 14 months ago when it came COVID-19. This has put life and livelihoods very severely affected, especially in the Indian context. Many of I'm equally patriotic, but the housing is not available for every single individual in this country. And then when we ask them to have a social distancing and ask them to clean their hands very frequently, especially during the summer, the COVID has come in the March 2020. They are not even having an access to drinking water. So how many of us can expect, or the medical team or WHO team is asking us to clean our hands very frequently. When I don't even have an access to drinking water, how do I have an access to wash my hands very frequently to be ensured or to be away from getting affected by this COVID-19? So today, there are 1.1 billion people exposed to climate hazards in our Asia Pacific region. This includes summers are becoming too hot. We are getting too frequent floods, sudden flooding, and drafters also. Drought and the water stress already, especially the Indian context with 1.4 billion people. There is already enormous amount of stress on even on a non-summer month. The water stresses extremely make it very difficult. So we do not meet the Paris Agreement, which started in 2015, and the global temperature rise to 2 degrees by 2050. Many may think that 30 years is there, but 30 years will go in a flash. So if we don't act collectively, if we don't act and implement the measures we are going to hear from Sheila ji and others, and through this Race to Resilience initiatives, so another 150 million more people will be exposed to the very unwanted concerns by 2050. So 375 million of this total of 1.3 billion people will be exposed to high severity of hazards, which will threaten the livelihoods of the entire human race. Next slide, please. If you see the geographic spread of risks, outside of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we can see the impact on communities across Southeast Asia. So this slide clearly says that how our own countrymen and our own human race across South Asia is extremely exposed to the risk of the climate change. Hundreds of millions, it's not a small number, hundreds of millions of people will be exposed to severe climate hazards, including in China, Indonesia, Vietnam, as it is highlighted in this particular slide. The biggest rises will come from urban water stress and the challenge of extreme heat and flooding that you have seen it in the Mumbai in India, which is a financial capital, where the populations runs into hundreds of millions, and then the water stress or whenever it floods and we get a severe storms, the entire life is thrown out of the gear. So next slide, please. So this slide beautifully articulates the need for resilient housing. So today's theme, or today's central theme for this entire session for the next 60 minutes to come, is the need for resilient housing. So we know, therefore, that to protect livelihoods, we need to be making homes which are resilient to the climate change. There will be increasing number of people living in the cities, as you all seen in the last 10 or 15 years. More and more people are migrating into the cities. That is across the Asia Pacific. It's all the more exponential number of people migrate, leading to an increase in the impermeable surfaces and taking the flood risk to the next level. There will be increasing urban heat island effects. So every summer, the newspapers in Asia Pacific region, the headlines says that Hong Kong has registered the highest highest temperature in the last 100 years. Mumbai has registered. Cebu has registered the highest temperatures in the peak summer. So this is how the headlines of many of the newspapers that is occurring in every summer and every year after year. So there will be an increasing urban heat island effects, which is going to affect our entire lives and livelihoods and energy efficient cooling. The scale of this challenge is also increased by the fact that more than 30% of the urban population of South Asia live in informal settlements. I underline the word informal settlements. So you will hear more from Sheila ji and other distinguished speakers on this particular challenge. So the buildings and the housing stock in cities are also among the greatest causes of death and destruction in most of the natural disasters. Next slide, please. So having heard about the importance of race to resilience and how collectively all the non-state actors we have to play a very important role every minute from now on is very important in order to ensure we develop a resilient housing sector which ensures livelihoods of every human being on the planet Earth by 2030. And if we are not able to meet the Paris Agreement, 2050 will be having a disastrous effect. Hope we don't land up there. So now, having set the context, I have beautiful line of speakers. I thank each one of them. We are already seeing innovative solutions to these challenges. So let us put the spotlight on what is working and where more resources are needed. So can I go to the next slide, please, Amanda? So now we are going to start the much awaited session in the form of keynote from reputed and worldwide recognized Ms. Sheila Patel ji. I'm delighted to welcome first climate champions ambassador Ms. Sheila Patel, who is the founder director of the Society of Promotion of Area Resource and Centers, and she is popularly known as SPARC. And Ms. Sheila is an outstanding advocate for frontline community action, and she is a leader on climate resilient housing work around the world through her work with the Slum Dwellers International. Ms. Sheila, we would not ask for a better advocate to kick off our very important session, which is part of the Race to Resilience as a part of UNF's CCC. I now hand it over to Ms. Sheila ji. Over to you, Ms. Sheila ji.
Thank you so much, Anand, and good afternoon from Mumbai to my fellow speakers and to all the participants. I'm very honored that the Race to Resilience has recognized the need for social movements of the urban poor, of different kinds of social movements to join the Race to Resilience and champion the space in adaptation through inviting me to be one of its ambassadors. And on behalf of the many social movements that I'm working with and together with many of the NGOs and civil society groups around the world that are working on housing, we believe this is a very important space in which we have to maintain our very strong carbon neutral footprint. The issue of informality has been one that has been deeply neglected, along with the role and contribution of what cities and urbanization can do to address the reduction of carbon emissions in our race to zero. We believe that adaptation, which to me means the choices that we make available to every individual, household, neighborhood, communities, to participate in transforming the crisis that we are facing in the planet, is crucial. Of course, mitigation is important, but for all of us who are presently living in cities, we are going to tip the balance one way or the other. And for those who live informally, this has a dual implication. It has an opportunity to showcase the contributions that we make by having such a light carbon footprint in the work and the spaces that we inhabit. But we also want to participate in ensuring that this intergenerational impoverishment that the poor face in cities by being constantly unable to become a part of the city, by remaining informal, by remaining invisible, to showcase the innovations that we can contribute to make change happen, and the volume of change that we can participate in if we work together with those who presently see us just as beneficiaries of crisis assistance. Be it COVID, be it disasters, communities of the poor, especially women, are treated as if they are the recipients of welfare and charity. We want to change that. We want to become partners that share the amazing innovation that we can contribute. We want to demonstrate that we can be shoulder to shoulder with technology providers, with businesses, to take solutions that we can bring into our lives. We want to remind everybody that informal settlements house a very huge volume of businesses that are informal, but are as much part of the private sector as the big businesses. We have produced neighborhoods, we have invested in our own housing, and we have contributed to the production of so many things that the cities need, both in terms of its infrastructure, its commerce and industry, but all which remain like the iceberg, where only the tip is known, but the majority remains invisible. And therefore, in this discussion today, we hope that the work of my colleagues will address these issues. And I especially want to congratulate Bijal, who is my friend and colleague, for the fact that the work of Mahila Seva has received global recognition as being the 5 most innovative interventions in the habitat space by the work that Mahila Seva has done. So I want to end here with saying, treat informal residents and their movements as serious partners in whichever city you are. And remember that many of them contribute hugely to the rural economies in your countries, just as the global diaspora contributes foreign direct investment to our countries. That is very critical for our economies. So Anand, thank you again for inviting me. And I hope that we will all work together and come back for sessions like this mid-year around COP to look at what we have begun to do together, because partnerships is the only way we are going to crack this challenge. So back to you, Anand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Sheila Ji, for setting us a wonderful contest and showcasing the need for it. In fact, you have brought in the urgency, how collectively we have to address this biggest challenge each one of us are facing in providing a housing, especially with the climate change. We call from the Indian Green Building Council, which I am part of it, we stress on climate crisis actually, because we are able to see the frequent floodings happening in many of the cities like Chennai and Mumbai year after year. And then few months after the flooding is there, people starve for water actually. So ironical. And then especially the marginalized communities and others, they struggle a lot to bounce back after every natural disaster. Thank you, Ms. Sheila Ji, once again for setting us this entire discussion. I'm happy now to begin to welcome our excellent speakers to talk through the work they are doing in their communities to build climate resilient housing. And having heard from the keynote speaker, Ms. Sheila Patel Ji, now it's our pleasure to put the spotlight on the 4 speakers who are going to share their own experiences, expertise associated with resilient housing. So we have with us Ms. Mardi Mapa, Country Director for Philippines and Indonesia at Build Change, representing Race to Resilient Initiative, Resilient Housing. Welcome, Ms. Mardi. Next speaker, we have Ms. Bijal, who is the Director of Mahila Housing Trust in India. She has been involved in various interesting projects, and enormous amount of accreditation and accolades have come to her. Welcome, ma'am, Ms. Bijal, ma'am. And the third speaker is Ms. Vanisha Peter, founder of Information and Resource Center for Deprived Urban Communities, representing Race to Resilience Partner Initiative, Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance. So we are very fortunate to have Ms. Vanisha Peter, who is working with various initiatives addressing the necessities and needs of the deprived urban communities. And especially she is working on the initiative of Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance. So welcome, Ms. Vanisha. And finally, we have Ms. Kotashram, Chief Executive Officer, Porous City Network from Thailand. So we are having 4 renowned speakers from across the country, across the world. In fact, I would say Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines, and a couple of them from our own country, India. So now we are going to start the very interesting panel discussion after heard from Sheila Patel ji, who has set the contest for all of us. Now let me put the spotlight on Mardi. So I will jump straight into the heart of the matter, finance, which bothers each one of us, including all of us. We all know that, yes, after hearing from Ms. Sheila ji, everybody has understood, yes, we have to do it. But all of us, we have the stigma, how it is going to cost. The finance is a very, very challenging terminology or the word which we have it right in front of all of us. So can you tell us how Build Change and the Resilient Housing Network at large are leveraging financial solutions to make climate resilient housing more affordable in the Philippines, so that we can all learn from you, and then we can fine-tune your solutions offered through your firm in Philippines to suit our own requirement. Over to you, Mardi.
Okay, thanks, Anand. Hi to everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah. So Build Change mission is to prevent housing loss caused by disasters, now which we've been doing in many Asia Pacific countries since 2004. And we're very happy to be part of the race to resilience, because like you, we want to raise the relevance of housing as imperative to climate action today. So we see the numbers of disasters increasing, right? But we've also seen how having people displaced and properties destroyed are preventable if we build climate resilient housing. Plus, as each disaster brings devastation, construction of new buildings will also result in the rise of carbon emissions, because this sector's activity accounts for nearly 40% of all carbon emissions. So what we at Build Change have learned is that there are 3 basic barriers to resilient housing: people, money, and technology. And today I'd like to focus my sharing on how we build change in Build Change is successfully integrating climate action while addressing social inequities through a successful financial model for resilient homes. Specifically, I'd like to show you how we work with financial partners and leverage innovative financial solutions in the Philippines to make housing more accessible and affordable to vulnerable and marginalized communities. So, as you know, the Philippines is one of the countries with the highest disaster risk. Now we have earthquakes, typhoons, extreme weather events that are becoming more frequent, more intense as a result of climate change. So Build Change started by supporting post-disaster communities here. Then we transitioned into pre-disaster prevention a few years after. We then started working with financial institutions and homeowners to help them gain access to financing for the building and structural strengthening of their homes. Now, starting with a pilot of 19 homes, we proved that home improvement programs which combined a home-driven approach to safe construction with client-centric financial services could be done inexpensively, sustainably, and at scale. So, and today we've reached over 200,000 people to advance the message of resilient housing. And that was possible because we partnered with microfinance institutions to finance climate resilient housing. Our research showed that an estimated 50% of all Filipinos are in need of housing improvements. And these homeowners have either the option of either purchasing a home by mortgage or undertaking home repairs through a non-mortgage loan. And although there are a wide variety of mortgage providers in the Philippines, we found that it was these microfinance institutions, and we call them MFIs, who provided the most feasible non-mortgage loans. Plus, they are a trusted community financier, and they have a reach of over 11 million Filipinos throughout the country. But MFIs here don't traditionally provide loans for housing because of their limited internal capacity for housing product development and limited fund resources. And so what we did in Build Change was to work with them to develop a small loan product with no collateral and appropriate for an incremental build, no? Like depending if they want to start first by covering the expense for the wall and then the ceiling and so on, right? So we worked with them, and today we are collaborating with 6 MFI partners who are in the process of scaling these home strengthening products. We're also trying to bring in national government to provide green bonds, which we call Balay Verde, for a constructive public-private partnership. So that's where we are now.
Thank you, Marty. Thank you very much. It's amazing to hear about the people, planet, and money, and what it started in a small way. Now 200,000 people getting benefited in the home improvement is an amazing example. And then we would love to reconnect with you after the session, and you will get more queries also. So the next question here is, great to hear whatever you articulated in a very innovative solutions, how you are working with MFIs and green bonds through the government. And already it is rolling out in a very big way in Philippines. But could you also tell us, how is your initiative engaging communities into resilient housing projects to ensure those projects are locally appropriate, and the key word is trusted also? Can you throw some light on this?
Yeah. So the strength of that model I just shared with you is that it's inclusive, right? We want the homeowners to want to make their home safer. So they are, as Sheila mentioned, serious partners. Now we at Build Change work to increase demand for resilient housing by raising awareness, helping families take preventive measures before a disaster strikes. But more importantly, we begin by involving the homeowners from the very start, so that the solutions and the designs to improve their homes are acceptable to them. We work with their unique needs, if they're near the beach or up in the mountain, their cultures, and of course, whatever assets the homeowners have to make the climate smart investments. So depending, as I said, we offer, how much you can afford, then that's what we will work on. We then support communities to demand better housing. And then we network, of course, with global and local financial and development organizations, other NGOs, CSOs, so they can support our efforts with incentives and investments. And as we mentioned, because we believe in the interdependence of people, money, and technology, we think it's very important that we need to take a holistic and systematic approach. I'll just quote our Build Change founder and CEO, Dr. Elizabeth Hausler. Now, she said, we have to bring the financing, the engineering, the supply chain innovations, the technology, the political will, and the homeowners to the table. So in summary, we're working to change the system so climate resilient housing is as accessible and affordable at scale. And we're building change to impact the climate resilience of communities. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, thank you, Marty. In fact, it is very amazing. You're using the word serious partners, better housing, and glad that you shared your vision of your CEO, bringing all the stakeholders. I cannot, where in a country or a community where the policy is encouraging, but the financial sectors are not doing well, where the architects are not tuned. So wherein you wanted, your CEO said that financial institutions, policymakers, architects, engineers, technology providers, solution providers, and the community has buy-in. That is an amazing way to bring every stakeholder so that it is holistic in a way. Everybody plays a vital role in order to ensure we enhance the resilient housing. Amazing. Thank you, Marty, for your sharing.
Thank you too,
Anand. Especially the Build Change. We would love to closely work with you. Build Change, how this can be it can be replicated. It can be done in many of our Asia Pacific countries, taking a leaf out from the Philippines experience.
Thank you. Yeah.
So now I would love to turn the spotlight on to Ms. Baijalji for her perspective on that. Ms. Baijal, would you like to show some light on the community engagement based on your rich and varied experience? Over to you, Ms. Baijal.
I don't want this visual now. That's fine. I mean, you can keep it on the screen, but I will be showing it later on. My name is Bijal Brahmbhatt, and I work with an organization called Mahila Housing Trust, and we work across almost 1,500 slums, informal slum settlements in 7 states of India. And we work with the poor women in the informal sector, trying to improve their housing, living, and working environments. Now, if I talk about India, 80% of the current workforce comes from the informal sector. So the informal sector, generates that level of employment. And almost nearly 90% of that 80% of the workforce is actually women. Because women are more in the informal sector, large and quite a significant number. I forget the statistics now, but quite a significant number are actually working as home-based workers. And even if they work as vendors, they partly use their house as their workplace. So their house actually is a workplace. It's a go down. It's a production house. Women produce kites, women roll Indian cigarettes, women stitch at home. Street vendors actually bring their goods from the wholesale market and store it in their house. And so if you don't have a good house, obviously your livelihoods is going to suffer. And if you don't have access to infrastructure like water and access to electricity and, probably if your house is very, very hot, it's going to hamper your economic productivity. I mean, studies that we have conducted have shown that a minimum of 1.5 hours to 2 hours of productive working hours are impaired. What we do is we actually organize these informal communities within the slum settlement into community-based organizations and community action groups. Enable them to voice their concerns to the government and the private sector on habitat development. What we have been doing specifically related to building their climate resilience is that we have been working on a little bit of long-term stressors. For example, heat is a huge stressor that's going to be very evident across the Asia Pacific, the global South. And it's a given in India. So poor don't realize how it's going to affect their lives because it's always hot. So 1 or 2 degrees here now and then, probably they don't realize how it's going to impact their lives. So the first and foremost thing when you're working on climate stressors actually is that because they are abstract and the poor women are trained, they sometimes tend to think very short term because they are worried about their next meal, about their children's education. These long-term stressors are something that, they probably may not be willing to think about and may not be willing to invest. So I think the first thing is building their capacities to understand the science of climate change and demystify it for them. So once we organize them, but also, build their capacities to demystify the entire phenomena scientifically. Let me just show one, because of shortage of time, if you can have that visual. So what we did is we actually, as a part of a very huge program, which was funded by the Global Resilience Partnership, this is one small component that I'm showing, in which we work with the technologists. So here is a cool roof that has been, put up on an informal home. And here is the traditional tin sheet, which most of the informal settlements use. And so what we did is we actually piloted this technology into the informal settlements. We trained the women to record read the temperature logger and record the temperature here and then compare it with the Indian Meteorological Department temperature record for that day. And they realized that it's 5 to 6 degrees lower. And, then they then they wanted to go out and buy it. So we then had to create a financial solution. As Muddy said, it's very, very important. And, one of the feedback that they gave to the technologists, in fact, was that, they didn't like these kind of corrugations that they have on the AC sheet because then they can't use it like a terrace to slip on. So they wanted to use these roofs. So earlier it had corrugations, which you can see now it is flat. So based on their feedback, the technologists actually then made a flat roof, and this color has also now become white instead of blue. I didn't have that picture, so that it reflects back more heat and doesn't absorb it. So this is how the technology improved. So I think we do need collaborations, as everyone said, but we need what I should term as radical collaborations. Collaborations which, there is a mutual empowerment. My experience has taught me that it's not only the poor who have to learn, but also the technologists and the scientists and the city makers who have to learn quite a lot from their demands and needs, and second, also from their indigenous knowledge that they already possess and probably are not so vocal about it because they don't even realize it that they have the knowledge. So it's a mutual empowerment process, and continuous feedback loop has to be there. And as I said, the experts also get empowered. Probably we will get a chance to work with the Green Building Council around this quite a lot. Going to the next visual. So here is where, I have this photograph, but I suddenly also realized about a technology that I would like to speak about, is that, we were working on the water scarcity issue, and water scarcity also means quality of water is going to deteriorate very, very heavily across India, and these settlements are going to be very heavily impacted. There are two examples. Here we have trained these women to actually test the water quality scientifically and then record it here on this sheet. And we have also trained them that if certain parameters go beyond control, then you have to approach the government labs for further intervention, because then it's beyond our control. It's beyond the layman control, and it has to be taken over by the government and then come up with, solutions. So a very strong part is also about their capacity building to interact at the same level and, find spaces, invited spaces for themselves on such, spaces that are created where they can talk directly to the government, to the private sector. Another example, a very, very powerful example. We were trying to introduce water purifiers in their homes, and we thought because they did not have 24-hour running water through a pipeline, usually in most slums, water will come for 2-3 hours and then they store it in water storage tanks. They may not have direct access to piped water supply. So we thought, the water purifiers that they would need probably cannot use a running water, and therefore, should not have an electric water supply. They should be independent from that. When we went there with that, they clearly stated that we believe that water will be purified only if electricity will run through it. So they wanted that kind of a water purifier. They were very clear that they wanted to invest only 2,500 rupees, which is around what, $25-30. They were also very clear that they did not, want to keep investing in changing the candlestick every quarter, because that was they could invest once in buying, but changing the candlestick, every quarter would mean investments all quarter. And then they said that we want a water purifier in this cost and not to change the candlestick so frequently. So that's the challenge to the much more educated technologists, to come up with a water purifier that would suit their needs and work collaboratively. So that has been our experience, which I just wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you, Paijal ji, for taking us through what Mahila Housing Trust in India is doing to raise the agency and bring more and more enhancement in the livelihoods. You beautifully articulated about the collaboration, bringing in the new technology and making a lot of great impacts at the ground level. May I also request from your great work, what more is needed to help and ensure that the voices of the communities are being incorporated into resilient housing discussions, and more so in the policy making?
Can we go to the next next slide, please? Yeah. So here is something, a process that we started way back in 2000, just a successful example. This lady here has been trained as an energy auditor. So she takes this portable watt meter and moves from one slum household to another slum household. And you can see she is checking, supporting the women in checking the wattage from an incandescent traditional bulb vis-a-vis a CFL and their usage. So that's how then the women realize that they may have to invest early on less in incandescent bulb. But if they buy a CFL bulb or an LED bulb, probably the usage would be much less. They have audited such 30,000 households to date, and many of these women have got converted into using CFLs and LEDs. Now, when this example was cited to the government, the government of India has now actually started something that they term as a Ujala Yojana, where women are, the CFL and LEDs are very heavily subsidized, and probably every household that you see in the informal settlements in India now has started using CFLs and LEDs instead of incandescent bulbs. So I again say the approach of these programs to include the informal settlements and improve their livelihoods should be socio-technical and also have financial solutions with that. Whether it's a subsidy, whether it's a loan, a credit, or whether it's some other mechanism. So there is another big issue that we are trying to challenge right now, and that's the fact that India is going to produce 20 million affordable housing over the next few years. And these housing actually is, we have seen that when the poor move into that, we have studies to show that their energy costs have increased significantly. One, because their aspirations have increased, and second, also because these homes are not energy efficient. They are full of heat, and there is no thermal comfort, so the consumption increases. Now we don't have an energy conservation code for these poor women because we understood that we are working with CEPT University, who is a part of the committee of developing energy conservation code. And we understand that housing which is less than 250 square meter residential housing does not have an energy conservation code right now. So it can't go down to the 25 or 36 square meter housing that these poor women have. So this is the conversation that we have started actually with the CEPT University, and we will use the collaboration with them to probably talk to the government, the ministry, and both the energy ministry and the housing ministry. The other thing that we are trying to work on is now, this whole insurance. So what we have seen is that climate insurance is something which has not been heavily, introduced or worked upon. If something has been, little work has been done on agriculture insurance and weather insurance, primarily for rural areas. But urban areas, it's a different ballgame, and definitely not for the kind of insurance that we are going to work on, which is heat insurance and, flooding insurance for the urban poor communities. We are trying to develop them with a company technical which has technical expertise on this, co-develop the solutions. Once there is an uptake, we really would like to work with insurance companies and other MFIs who would support in the scaling up. And as we go along, hopefully I would have some results to show. So this is how we the approach has been and how we have been trying to work with them. Just an example.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Thanks for taking us through. And it is very heartening to listen to you saying that you are developing our capacity building and working closely with CEPT and having enormous amount of energy auditors and people who can talk, Mahila Trust, Mahila Housing Trust, people can talk to the people with respect to LED lamps, CFL lamps, and it's amazing, great to hear. So that they also by design, that is the objective of IGBC also. Whatever we do, by design from now on, we should land up in a water efficient systems, even a small tap, that should be what we are purchasing as a retrofit. It should be a ultra low flow fixture. Even a small bulb, one bulb in a 200 square feet house, couple of bulbs, all of them must be LED, and that should not compromise on the lighting levels, their comfort levels, but at the same time, they should consume the least of the least energy. Amazing. Very glad to hear. Very brilliant way of engaging people. The photographs are all stunning. How you moved on from the roofing sheet, from a corrugated to the flat, from a blue to white, which will not allow the heat to penetrate. Having energy auditors who can talk to them on their, that will have a better connect also. So very, very glad to hear, and we salute, we from the India GBC salute for the wonderful job you are addressing at the bottom of the pyramid, which is equally important, which we do in IGBC and CII, many activities. We would love to engage, and obviously we will have more and more questions in the chat box, as well as we will connect with you also. So very, very inspiring stories, how the Mahila Housing Trust is being led by you and able to bring in enormous amount of change and ensure that the people, the lives, their livelihoods, and they are also becoming more and more resilient over the period of time. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and thanks for joining us, Ms. Bejalji. So now let me turn on to our next speaker, Vanisha Peter. Vanisha, could you tell us how you engage with the policymakers to ensure that national policies and plans actually reflect the needs and realities of the communities? I repeat, needs and realities of the communities. Over to you, Vanisha.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. So I'm involved with the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, ERA, through Krish Mohan, who is the Chief Resilient Officer for Chennai, and Jayashree Venkateshan, who is the Managing Trustee of CARA Trust. So we work very closely with the Adriana Rockefeller Resilience Center. And first of all, before starting, I thought I would like to flag off two major issues when it comes to climate resilience. One is the existing climate resilience discourse often ends up criminalizing and promoting a socio-spatial segregation of the deprived urban communities. So that often we find that there is a massive resettlement of communities in the guise of climate resilience discourse. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, and most of it is done through the housing processes. So the second major challenge that we have is the existing design of the housing does not factor disaster resilient factors, especially the extreme heat situations. So these are the two major challenges that we face. Now, how do we engage with the policymakers? So as you know, IRCDUC is our information hub. So we believe in connecting the people, the policy, and the policymakers. So that's what we do most. And how we do it is by amplifying the voices of the communities through community-led processes. So we have evolved citizens reports, we have evolved, let's say social audit reports, we have evolved policy briefs, and through media advocacy, we ensure that the voices of the communities are amplified to the policymakers. So how do we do it? One is ensuring access to information. So if you think that we do is to ensure that the key documents are translated in the vernacular language, which means communities have access to information. Secondly, we also facilitate a lot of community processes at the field level, and we package it in a form which is, acceptable to the policymakers. So these are the two things that we have been doing. And recent past, I would like to flag off two of our biggest impacts. One is by lobbying with the various international finance institutions, we are able to lobby with our own policymakers. So we have extensively lobbied with the international finance institution, and as a result of which, for the first time in Tamil Nadu, we have a resilient urban design framework which has come into existence. And this resilient urban design framework is for Tamil Nadu Slum Clearance Board, who's the nodal agencies for constructing houses for the vulnerable communities in the state. So what has happened eventually is that this particular resilient urban design framework has, for the first time, has also addressed issues related to disasters as well as extreme heat. So that is one of the ways in which we have influenced the policy. Second is by demonstrating pilots. So there are two examples. What we have done is, one, we have convinced the government to come up with terrace gardening in all the urban homeless shelters, which means it addresses the issue of livelihood. It addresses the issue of food security, especially during the pandemic. The shelters were able to harvest organic vegetables, which they have grown, which also means in some of the shelters, like for the mentally challenged or the persons with disability, it was actually a kind of a therapy in itself. So these are some of the pilots which we have demonstrated to make the communities, the government understand that the vulnerable communities should not be distanced from the existing resilience discourse, but rather should be included in the process. So the second thing that we are doing now is also including greening processes in the urban informal as well as low income settlements. So that is something that we are now addressing with the government, and we are very sure that the government will take it up. And there are two other things that we have flagged up, and those reports are also available online. Is we have done a pan-India study on the existing legal safeguards available for related to housing and land across the country. So in that, we have done an extensive analysis of how the components related to resilience, the component related to extreme heat is not featured in most of these policies. So that we are in the process of, we have already compiled it. We are in the process of now negotiating with the policymakers at the national level.
Thank you, Vanisha. Thanks, and it's very heartening to hear that you are already engaging with the Slum Clearance Board in Tamil Nadu in India. And then, as many of you may be aware, CII is a 125-year-old Apex Industry Association in India, started the Indian Green Building Council (IGBC) in year 2001. We have brought out an exclusive rating program called IGBC Green Affordable Homes. When you are talking to the slum rehabilitation and asking them to go for a pilot, Vanisha, can you also integrate this IGBC Green Affordable Homes as a part of the policy so that by design, they get a better structure? Sometimes the rehabilitation projects are not getting the best of the best designs, the kind of services or the facilities which is required. We should not miss the bus now. So my request to you is how we can work with you in order to make green is nothing but bringing in more and more fresh air, daylight, providing better views, as well as whatever they use, right? The steel, the cement, the tiles, all of them for the slum rehabilitation or affordable home. And it is very simple. Even common man can understand. It is not rocket science. So each one of us can understand. We would love to work with you, Vanisha, on how IGBC's green affordable homes can be integrated with Tamil Nadu policy to start with, as well as for the Baijalji and others, how the slum rehabilitation authorities in Mumbai, where many of the projects are going, how the green can also be integrated by design through the policy interventions. So another question, you are here today representing the Extreme Heat Resilience Alliance, Vanisha, which is a Race to Resilience partner initiative also. One of its target under the Race to Resilience campaign is to have cities develop and access new financing for long-term investments to reduce the heat island, the heat-related mobility. Could you also tell us a bit more about the innovative financial solutions or the risk transfer solution for responding to unavoidable heat-related shocks? Can you throw more light on this?
Thank you so much. Before starting with a specific question, I'll be definitely interested in taking it up, because one of the process of us doing, evaluating the existing framework, and we will definitely love to connect with you to take more inputs from you so that we can make the existing framework into a more, effective one. So going on to the second question, as part of the alliance, one thing that we are working on is ERA is aiming to try to bring about a risk transfer product, and this has been now undertaken by the Finance and Risk Transfer Working Group of ERA. So they are in the process of working on it, and as we have started only in the month of August, we still have we are still in the process of coming up with solutions. But one of the primarily aim of the Finance and Risk Transfer Working Group is also to ensure that these cities get connected with with finance, because this is very important, because we've seen the kind of investments, if you were to map the kind of investment that goes on into building resilience of the communities, we see this is one of the gray areas where we don't have much of investment towards these insurance as well as the other building the resilience of communities. So this is definitely one of the things, though I'm not part of the group, but this is what we've been doing here. And especially in this context, I would also like to say that this is at the international level with ERA. This is what is actually happening. So eventually, they are also working towards, coming up with this risk transfer product. So another thing that I also wanted to do is there are two levels of ways of doing it. One is also to kind of look at the mapping of institutions which are, providing such kind of funding, and then connecting the different cities on these, because that access to information for grassroots groups who are working at the grassroots level is also very important. So the mapping of resources, mapping of stakeholders, mapping of alliance stakeholders for prospective alliances is also something which is very important. So this is something that we at the local level is also looking at it. Third, definitely one thing that we have realized and which we are looking forward for doing is how the entire narrative on climate resilience needs to include communities. See, this is very important, because only when the voices of the communities is heard, we will know what kind of products that the communities need to do. Otherwise, it's again going to be a top-down approach, So this is yet another thing that, we are working as part of the alliance. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Manisha. As you rightly said, what they want has to be first, we have to engage them and we have to hear them and then align it so that they are all provided with what they need, the basic necessities, all have to be met. So the community's engagement is very, very important, right from the policy development and coming up with the model on the financial model or going to the pilot projects, so that the community also are aware that whatever they asked. And then, Manisha, there are some few questions on the chat box, and my own chairman, Mr. V. Suresh, has asked. You can go through it. In meantime, I'll go to our next speaker. You can answer him, or I'll ask you to chip in later on. Thank you, Manisha, for the very inspiring and thoughtful process, and wish you all the very best for various activities with slum dwellers authorities across the country. Now, let me turn on to the spotlight to Kochak Karan, the CEO of the Porous City Network. The title itself, the Porous City Network. Being a green building professional, we would all love to have the porous surfaces which will allow the rainwater and all the surfaces. Amazing title you got, Porous City Network, Thailand. So thanks for joining us in this United Nations session on Race to Resilience. So Coach, you have heard from the previous keynote speaker and the 4 speakers of the co-panelists on their engagement with the communities and policymakers. Now I would request you to keenly request you to address how you engage youth, especially the Asia Pacific and India. They have a huge population of youth into your work, so that it ensures they're all integral part of the design, execution, and ownership related to the resilient housing. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored to be with all the female panelists and with all of you today. So let me share the screen quickly. Can you see my screen? Yes.
Yeah, we are able to see. You can put it in the projection mode. Yes. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, great. That's a very good question. I feel that the housing problem, the climate change problem, and many more problems, we cannot be fixed in one generation. It's not about throwing responsibility to another next generation, but I just feel that we need to plant the seed. And I have so many hats. I'm a landscape architect, so I'm also teach landscape architecture. And I have a good opportunity to be involved with the younger generation of designer. This is a picture I taught student in Harvard University, which is like a future great designer. And I just feel that they should be part of the solution rather than only produce designer to serve the private sector. We just have to produce designer and those who know the solution to serve those who are in need. So I brought them to Thailand to see the real problem that is not only just kind of like the Western climate change impact, but it should be the worldwide problems. เธอเดี๋ยวก่อนได้ป่ะอ๋อโอเคแล้วไงอะ
อันนั้นต้องใช้หน้าอื่นที่หน้าเป็นนี้
Okay. Okay, good. So yeah, so we actually bring them to the community, use what the tools we taught in school, like model, and communicate with the real user. And they should, the process should be participatory, but how can that process also enhance the education system, and this definitely for the design education. This is like one of the work from the students, which is like low-income housing, and got award from the ASLA, American Landscape Association, the first prize. But it's actually like talking about compassion and design of the housing to the poor, and also have them be part of this communications and having them coming up with solution. And let's build together. So this is like one of the community along the canal. They flood. They stay in the flood for like two to 3 months when it comes to the great flood. And definitely right now is our project is actually being built. It's a lot of effort, but yes, we actually can be part of that. So I think that's the only way. We cannot just work within ourselves. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Glad to see how you're able to engage the youth who come up with enormous amount of energy. They come out with brilliant, leading edge and futuristic solutions. The great photographs shows that the youth are all willing to get into doing a groundwork. Great to see the photographs of the design elements for the rehabilitation projects. Is amazing. Thank you, Kocha, for sharing. It brings an enormous amount of energy for all of us who is hearing in this panel also to connect with the youth. As you rightly said, it is not only always the corporates or the big time clients. So amazing. We from the Race to Resilience panel, we congratulate you. Having seen on the very innovative way how you are able to engage the youth and how they are able to communicate and bring in a more and more enhancement and more better livelihoods. Your organization has been awarded the last year as the UN Global Climate Action Award on nature-based solutions to increase urban adaptability. So we in India Green Building Council also, we always believe in the design and construction should always be built around the nature, built around the environment wherever we have. So could you tell us what innovative landscape solutions for urban resilience are possible and how those address the climate hazards affecting Thailand especially? Over to you, Coach.
Thank you. And yes, I just feel that when you use nature-based solution, you have to understand what is your nature. So let's say, for example, like my city is Bangkok, and it's actually, we are in swamp, we are wetland. The whole region of central Bangkok or central Thailand is actually a wetland. And right now, this is what's happening to our porous landscape. So we no longer porous. No wonder why it's flooding so badly. No wonder why it's PM 2.5. And no wonder there's so many more like urban heat island and many more problems. So to understand the nature, it's not the nature that we are understanding like 10 years ago. It's a changing nature. So my example of using my opportunity as a landscape architect is actually produce a solution. This is the park I did. It actually can hold the water like 1 million gallons of water. And let's see the ocean of concrete that's covered that porous landscape. I just feel that all the development in the urban setting, in every housing, need to think more about how we're gonna live with water. Either too much of the water flooding or too little of the water is like drowned. So this park is actually can absorb water with wetland and equipped with many equipment. I'm not going to go into detail. And another work is the biggest urban farming rooftop in Asia in the University Thammasat. We're actually using the wisdom of rice terraces So the wasteland of like the top roof of the concrete actually only create us problems. Why don't we use those kind of space that we have million square meters around our city to turn into the food security place? And that is actually how the community gather, younger generation, every generation, even my generation. We don't know where our food come from. It's actually can be possible to come out from the roof or the waste space. So this is all the nature solution that can combine with the city. And it's not only just for those in the city, but those in poor areas as well. So the housing is not just the housing, but the housing should involve the livelihood. And this is another projects that they want to build dams. And we actually analyze for the community to say that your dam is actually is going to create more problems in terms of this is how it's going to look like in the future, and other livelihood will change with just having 400 million budget. So I just feel that to have the design education, to have a design communication for the community to understand what's going on with their life, how can they make decisions with their own and with the help of us and negotiate with the government. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great example. And even where I'm sitting, I have a green roof. This is the greenest building in the world. We got in 2003, which is India GBC's headquarters in India. Amazing to see at the large scale urban roofs taking up your landscape designs in order to ensure not only energy security, but the food security also. And that also, as you rightly mentioned, the greenery on the rooftop engages the youth. They'll be able to touch the grains. This is where I get the rice from. This is where I get my wheat for the bread. Comes from this particular plant.
Yeah,
so that
exactly.
gives a great connectivity.
It's
So
actually also helps slow down runoff as well, because it's raining like pouring in Thailand. So to slow down runoff is actually helping the urban flooding in the area.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, that's what we also say in green buildings. It is not only about the building or having a roof above you. As you rightly said, housing is not having a roof above your head, but how it enhances your livelihood, how the fresh air, the built environment in and around the house brings in more and more connectivity, brings in the natural daylight deep inside that, so that we all get our vitamin D also through the natural sunlight, so that we need not believe on or rely on the supplements for getting the vitamin D for our body. So we call it as a body, mind, and soul, how it can be enhanced when you bring in these kind of green interventions. Thanks, Kosha, for sharing your landscape architectural design, which has got, no wonder you got the UN Global Climate Action Award. We in the Race to Resilient team, on behalf of the entire team, we wish you all the very best, and you should get more and more awards and accolades. And we would love to engage you in all our activities on the resilient housing to come. So as you all heard from the brilliant keynote speaker, Sheila ji, followed up by Mardi, then the Baijal ji's Mahila Housing Trust, how she is able to engage all the stakeholders, collaborating and bringing in the technology. Then Vanisha thrown open a lot of key success stories, how the communities are engaged, how the communities are offered a platform to communicate what they want, then translate into a pilot project, then taking it to the policy level initiatives. That is brilliant. And the last but not the least, hearing from Kocha, the Porous City Network, great examples where the Thailand receives enormous amount of rainfall to certain parts of India and others in the Asia Pacific, how the landscape architectural interventions can bring in slowing down the runoff from the cities or the buildings, how to engage the youth. It has come out really well. As you are all great professionals involved in your own way, we all know the meaning of resilience, but nevertheless, I would love to mention the Oxford Dictionary meaning says the ability of people or things to recover quickly after something unpleasant, such as shock or natural disasters happen. So first, the race to resilience, we don't want our human race or the planet Earth should not face any natural disaster. We would love to eliminate or minimize. So that is all about this race to resilience. And even in the event of a flooding or having an extreme drought, how it is how it is not going to affect the marginalized people, how it is not going to affect their lives and livelihood. Even the last 14 months, the pandemic has affected many of us across the world and more so in the Asia Pacific. So this race to resilience, with a collective wisdom and knowledge available with all the speakers and all the panelists and the stakeholders who are listening to all of us, with the global population of almost 7.8 billion people around, and especially the Asia Pacific population is 4.7 billion people. So if you talk about Asia alone, there is around 30%, and India's population, amongst all this, India's is 1.39 billion people. So the numbers are very large, and the stake is very, very huge. And we have the solutions. You all heard from the panelists. There are enormous amount of inspiring, successful story rolled out across Thailand, Philippines, India, and other places across the Asia Pacific. And the recent storms, especially the Amphan which has hit the East Coast, as well as on the West Coast of India and the Philippines and Hong Kong, that had a devastating effect, and we put enormous amount of resources, and it has put all of us in a deep trouble in order to bounce back. And 6.7 million people are estimated to be in the Mumbai city alone, one city alone in India. So the race to resilience is a very, very important initiative of UNFCCU. So we in the race to resilience team are very happy to have Sheila ji and the 5 distinguished speakers who have shared the successful stories, which has given us enormous amount of hope actually. So it is doable with respect to the design interventions, engaging the communities, hearing them out, what they need, then having the pilot, coming out with the various innovative policy framework. And you also heard from the bill change, how the financial packaging can be done in order to suit the local terrain, which will also allow every community to come out with having the better buildings and built environment, which will eliminate their hardship in facing any natural disasters. So once again, we from the Race to Resilience team of the United Nations backed up program, we thank all the speakers who have joined us from across the globe and all the stakeholders who are all listening to us in the 2 live channels. So as we all heard, they're all doing incredible work in their own communities and have given us enormous amount of inspiring and exemplary examples of the best practices, which can bring in enormous amount of change in the way in which we think, way in which we act, and the decision making can be influenced by what we all heard for the last 50 minutes or so. So it is obviously clear that we cannot truly deliver resilience without tackling underlying issues such as gender inequality, which acts as a barriers. Of course, what we need is more and more of implementing whatever you heard, more and more action and implementation on ground is very, very important, so that for the next 10 years, the race to resilience becomes a very powerful movement, and it enhances the livelihoods of every common man on the planet Earth. So we will not solve the issue of climate resilient housing by COP26, which is hardly few months from now. But have you all heard from this panelist and the keynote speaker, we can place it firmly on the agenda, the rising level of ambition by the states on the issue to bring more and more resources to this particular innovative and unique work. You can all reach out to more and more information by going into this race to zero, unfccu.international. The websites and email IDs are available in the slide. So we from the Race to Resilience team, which is a UN-backed program, we all would love to thank all the speakers and all the participants who have joined us in large numbers. We would love to engage you. This is only what you're seeing is only the tip of the iceberg. What it needs to be done collectively by engaging you all is a long journey in front of all of us. So once again, we from the Race to Resilience team, as a part of the entire speakers and the panels, and I am at the individual level also, Anand from the Indian Green Building Council, all the IGBC stakeholders are available because India has a huge number of opportunities and a huge number of world-class solutions are also being already implemented and operation. So we are all available to share what we can do collectively in order to avert all the disasters coming up across in the next 30 years. And then we would love to set the target and roll out the action plan with intermediate goals. It is not that we all wake up in 2045 or 2049 to achieve the 2050 targets. So from today onwards, what are the things we will do? So I encourage all of you to be in touch with the great team, Theo and others who are all put up this whole program. You can contact them at resilience@climatechampions.team. The Climate Champions team is having a huge agenda in front of us before the COP26 and further. So we from the Race to Resilience team, as a part of the Climate Resilient Housing session, we are very fortunate to have the leading experts from across the globe and participants. Thanks for joining us in a larger number. Have a safe evening. Enjoy the evening. Thanks for joining.